Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, it's Polly Brennan here from 𝗥𝗘𝗧𝗕𝗔𝗚𝗦 Coaching. How are you? I'd like to talk to you about words of wisdom and advice today. So the reason why I want to do this is that, we all have wise words and we all have great advice. Sometimes we forget that we actually have great advice within us that we can use ourselves. And sometimes we go to other people for advice when actually we know the answers. So it feels like a really important topic. So I'm going to share some advice that other people have given, and I'm going to invite you to see which parts of that actually could be helpful to you, but to actually also remind you to ask yourself what your wise words and what your advice is. Does that sound okay? I hope so. So here's a question for you. Have you ever heard yourself give advice to a colleague or a friend or a family member and then been kind of surprised by that, by what you've heard yourself say, and realising that you actually sound really clear? There's a lot of clarity in what you're saying and a lot of wisdom. And maybe that surprised you because you didn't perhaps think of yourself as someone who has good advice to give. So I want you to think about that and bear in mind that sometimes we have great advice within us, and it might be that comes from a different situation. Perhaps what we'd learned in one situation in life is great advice to us that we can apply to other situations. So and when you hear yourself giving advice and sounding really clear, this is going to come from your experiences you've had, what you've learned along the way already, and your intuition. And I think perhaps sometimes we don't trust our intuition enough, and perhaps we need to listen to our intuition more. So, okay, I'm going to share a bit different pieces of advice. And the first one comes from advice from an 80-year-old man. Now, you might have seen this online. It was a list of pieces of advice from a 90-year-old man, 80-year-old man, apologies. So I'm going to read some of them out. I just picked some out. One of them was, sing in the shower. Always accept an outstretched hand. Be brave. I like this one. If you don't feel brave, fake it. Usually people can't tell the difference. Another wise one, choose a life mate carefully, because from this decision comes 90% of your happiness or your misery. Keep a notepad by your bedside, because the $1 million questions usually come at 3 a.m. I thought that was a really good one. And also a nice one, be the most enthusiastic person that you know. Okay, so another piece of advice, I read a really interesting article and it was written by a woman called Andrea Mann. And here's some pieces of advice in her article that I thought were really, really valuable, certainly for me. The article is actually in my Facebook page, so you can look it up if you're interested. It's called Standard Issue. She says, on the toughest days, remember that your record of getting through difficult days so far is 100%. It's pretty powerful, isn't it? We just have to get through difficult days. And our record so far is 100%. Don't try to stop the waves from coming. Learn to ride them. So I guess that's about controlling the controllables in life. She also said life falls apart sometimes when it needs to be rebuilt. It could just be the start of a great adventure. So perhaps when things don't always feel good, it means that something's about to get broken so it can get fixed. She also said, time for yourself isn't self-indulgence and it isn't selfish. It's called self-care. So on that basis, we should make time every day for something nurturing for ourselves. Here's another one for you. No matter how slowly you go, keep going, just so long as you don't stop. It's good, isn't it? I'll have a little sip of water. I hope you like my adventure cup. And also she said, just because you think something, it doesn't mean it's true. This is fabulous, isn't it? Note to self, just because we thought something doesn't mean it's true. Sometimes we fret over things that have never happened, or they have happened already, so it's happened. Or it might never happen. So we have to think about what we're thinking and whether or not it's helpful. And we're also, final one from her, never too old to set another goal or build a new dream. So I really like that. And the final piece of advice I want to give you is from a 10-year-old girl. So this is a little girl called Erin, and she gave me some really great advice at the start of the year when I was struggling to get motivated. January is a month that is a struggle for me, and her advice to me was lovely. She said she was going to write me a recipe for action. So in her recipe, she recommended me a sprinkle of chili powder to fire me up, a telescope to help me see the way ahead and to help me see where I was going. She also advised me that I needed a jar to bottle up all my worries and fears and put a lid on it and a cork. Some blinkers to help me keep focused. So she knows me well. She knows I get really distracted by shinies and sometimes I don't get jobs finished. So she recommended that I have some blinkers. And then finally she said that I needed some pom-poms to become my own cheerleader. But she also said that she would be my cheerleader too, which I thought was lovely. So I said that was the last piece of advice. I have one more. It's a guy, a really, really lovely and interesting, inspirational guy who lives local to me called 𝗥𝗘𝗔𝗚𝗦. And he's an endurance cyclist. And he does phenomenal things. He said, adventure develops problem-solving skills. And what you can learn from one scenario, so for example, endurance on a bike event can help you overcome difficulties in other situations in life. I thought that was really great advice. So maybe we can transfer our knowledge from one scenario and our advice from one situation to help us with another. He also said when so that's a great piece of advice, but I guess one from me, when I've been doing some bike adventures and events, I've also learned a lot of things. I've just written a blog about it, so it's really fresh in my mind. So some of my notes to self are when the road feels tough, sometimes it's important to focus on just what's just ahead of you and not look too far ahead and get too overwhelmed, and just concentrate on what is happening now and what's possible and what's doable now. And also breathe. That's a really good piece of advice for life. Also, make sure you're in the right gear. So this is great advice for life in general. Make sure you are in gear, a gear that you can manage. Make sure you're setting a pace for yourself that's sustainable, and keep moving forward. Safety net planning is another piece of advice I could give you from that I can transfer from one piece of life to another, which is planning an event, planning a journey. Sometimes it's quite helpful to ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen here? And when you ask yourself that, you can start thinking about, oh gosh, how would I handle that? And then you can create a plan that would actually support you in that situation. So safety net planning is really, really valuable. Great piece of advice. And always ask yourself, is there an easier way to do things? So on a bike event recently, we hit a ford. The person I was biking with decided to fire through it quickly. He got stuck halfway and lost momentum, and he was knee-high in cold water. I stopped and worked out a clever plan to lift my bike over my shoulder. I tried to work out where the shallowest bit of water was. And then we just looked to our right and noticed a bridge. So always ask yourself, stop and check if there's an easier way to do things. So piece of advice from all sorts of situations, all sorts of different people, from an 80-year-old man to an endurance cyclist to a life coach to a 10-year-old girl, and all very, very valuable. So my final question to you is, what words of wisdom or advice have you remembered as I've been speaking today, that's important, that you want to remind yourself about and perhaps share with other people? How do you want to use this advice to help you get more of what you want from life? And how might that advice help you to thrive? So that's something for you to think about next. That feels really valuable, just to stop and check in with what you already know. Why aren't you using it? How might you use that piece of advice in a situation? And how might that change or help you thrive? So to finish up now, enough from me. Here's what I want you to do next. I'd like you to think about what you've learned and what you liked from what I've been talking about today, and share it with me. So contact me. I'd love that very much. I'd love to hear from you. Perhaps what you share with me will help me and help other people that I coach. So you can contact me, polly@adventurescoaching.com is my email address. You can also message me on Facebook, Twitter. Or if you have a scenario or a situation that you would like me to help you with as a life coach, perhaps you need someone on your team to help you follow your good advice. And finally, if you liked this video, please give me a wee thumbs up. It would really be great. Or comment. Or I'd love you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So today we talked about advice to self, with shared advice, and I'm leaving you with a challenge to think about advice you'd like to share. that's me finished of all I've got to say. I've said a lot, and I wish you well with whatever you're doing. I hope you have a great day, whatever you're getting up to. Just enjoy and trust yourself and have a great time. So that's Polly Brennan. It's been 100% pure Polly today, and I'm signing out. Goodbye.